Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something really intriguing, strategic non-commitment. It's like, you know, think of playing the field, but instead of relationships, we're talking about power. How staying independent, maybe even a little aloof, can actually get you ahead.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how this idea keeps coming up, throughout history. We'll be looking at some pretty savvy people like Queen Elizabeth I,
Mm.
who she really played that Virgin Queen card like a pro.
Yeah.
And then there's Alcibiades, this Athenian general who basically was a master at like playing both sides.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Queen Elizabeth I, she ruled forever, right? Like, wasn't everyone always kind of pushing her to get married? But she never did. Was that like a calculated move or what?
Oh, it was way more than just avoiding a wedding ring. Elizabeth, she was super strategic, and she knew that being single gave her a unique kind of power.
Yeah.
Like, for example, she kept potential suitors. Like, there was this guy, the Duke of Anjou. He was this powerful French nobleman, and she kept him, dangling, always hoping for marriage, but never actually committing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty smart because it helped her keep the peace with France. France didn't want to mess with her because they thought, maybe an alliance was possible. She understood that the possibility of commitment, that could be just as powerful as actually committing.
So she used her like unmarried status as this like tool to maintain power, kind of like her own ace in the hole.
Exactly. It was a brilliant tactic. She really cultivated this whole image, this Virgin Queen image,
Right.
powerful, independent, untouchable. It definitely made her desirable and it gave her a ton of authority, but she wasn't tied down to any particular guy or faction.
That's incredible. She basically took what everyone expected of her and like flipped the script and made it a source of power.
Okay, so let's talk about Alcibiades. What's his deal?
Well, Alcibiades, he was how do I put this? A bit of a wild card.
He was constantly switching sides between Athens and Sparta, always maneuvering to stay on top. It's like a classic example of using non-commitment to get ahead.
So instead of choosing a side, he like played the middle. How did that work out for him?
It was risky, for sure. He was playing a dangerous game,
Yeah.
but he managed to gain a lot of influence because he promised support to everyone, all sides, without really committing to anyone. So he was seen as like a valuable asset. Everybody wanted him on their team. It's a great example of like the potential and the risk, that comes with this whole approach.
Right. You have to be really careful not to like get tangled up in all your promises and end up with nothing.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing to see how this idea of strategic non-commitment pops up like in all these different time periods, right? It's like this like timeless piece of wisdom.
Totally. Like in one of the sources we looked at, there's actually a line that literally says, do not commit to anyone.
Wow, straight to the point.
Yeah. The idea is that real power comes from being independent. Like if you don't attach yourself to anything, you become the prize. Everyone wants to win your favor, so they'll work for it.
I see. So you create this kind of mystery, this like desirability because people can't quite figure you out. It's like everybody wants what they can't have, right?
Exactly. Think of it like imagine a bunch of shrubs, like all growing together in a thicket, right?
Okay.
The ones that are like all tangled up, they're struggling to get enough sunlight and nutrients. But the ones that are standing alone, those are the ones that can grow tall and strong because they have the space and the
Oh,
resources.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah, and it's the same with power dynamics. The more independent you are, the more you stand out from the crowd.
It makes me think about like sometimes we're so quick to like please people or jump into things without really thinking it through.
Mm.
And then it kind of backfires, right? Like you lose your leverage.
It totally does. And speaking of like modern day examples, the story of Henry Kissinger is really interesting. He was a master of, calculated neutrality, especially during that 1968 US presidential election.
Wait, he played both sides in a presidential election. How did he get away with that?
Oh, Kissinger was a very clever political operator.
Okay.
So he was advising both Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. Those were the two guys running for president. And he basically told both of them, whoever wins, I'm here to help.
Wow.
Yeah. So by not committing to either candidate, he made sure he'd have a spot in the next administration, no matter who won.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's like he was hedging his bets, but in a way that like made him super valuable to both sides.
Exactly. And it worked. He ended up as Nixon's national security advisor, which was a hugely powerful position. Kissinger's whole approach just shows how powerful calculated neutrality can be. It's about positioning yourself so that no matter what happens, you come out on top.
Okay, so we've seen how like not committing can lead to power, but I mean, other downsides. It can't all be good, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's not all sunshine and roses. The story of Isabella d'Este, the Duchess of Mantua, is a good example of, like, what can go wrong. She learned the hard way that committing too soon can really backfire.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, her husband, Francesco Gonzaga, he was initially allied with France.
Oh, okay.
But then he just suddenly switched sides and abandoned the alliance, which left Isabella and Mantua completely vulnerable. They basically had to fend for themselves in this really dangerous political climate.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's a harsh reminder that, like, allegiances can change really quickly, and those who are too deeply involved in one side can end up in a very precarious position.
So she was caught off guard because she was all in on her husband's strategy.
Right.
It's like she put all her eggs in one basket.
Exactly. There's this ancient Chinese proverb about a snipe and a mussel. That's a perfect example of this. So you have this snipe and this mussel. They're fighting each other. But while they're all distracted, a fisherman comes along and scoops them both up.
Oh, no.
The moral of the story is pretty clear. Those who stay above the fray, they're the ones who often end up winning.
Okay, so we've seen how this all played out in history. But what about us? Like, how can regular people apply these principles of strategic non-commitment? I mean, it seems like a pretty high-stakes game.
Well, think about it this way. You wouldn't invest all your money in just one stock, right?
Hopefully not.
Right. You want to diversify your portfolio so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You spread the risk and increase your chances of, coming out ahead. Strategic non-commitment is kind of like diversifying your commitment portfolio. It's about being picky with your battles and knowing when to hold back, choosing your commitments carefully.
So it's like instead of rushing to pick a side or commit to something,
Yeah.
we should take a step back, see what's happening, and then decide where we stand.
Exactly. You got to be thoughtful, strategic. And remember, non-commitment, it doesn't mean being passive. You're not indecisive.
Right.
It's an active strategy. You're gathering info, assessing who the players are, and then you make your move. A calculated decision.
Okay, so it's about being choosy, like knowing when to use your influence instead of just diving into every fight.
Yeah, precisely. It's like choosing to be the fisherman, not the, remember, the snipe and the mussel.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You don't want to be them.
I like that. That analogy really paints a picture. But can we get a little more practical here? Can you give me some real-life examples of how this might actually work, for people?
Sure, absolutely. Let's say you're in a work meeting. Two of your colleagues, they're going at it about some new strategy, right?
Yeah.
Instead of immediately jumping in and taking sides, you could just, hold back, listen to what they both have to say, and then when the moment is right, you offer your insights.
Oh, okay. So I'd be seen as more thoughtful, more objective, not just another voice in the argument.
Exactly. And because you didn't pick a side right away, you can be more flexible, right? Maybe offer a compromise. Or you could even, steer the conversation in a whole new direction.
It's like you're holding all the cards because nobody knows what you're going to do.
Exactly. And this works in personal situations, too. Imagine, you get invited to two social events. Same night.
Oh, that's the worst.
Right. So instead of instantly saying yes to one and no to the other, what if you just said, oh, that sounds fun, to both?
Okay, yeah.
See how things play out, get all the details, and then you decide which one works better for you.
So it's about keeping my options open, getting more information before I commit.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about having freedom and autonomy, making your own choices. Whether it's business or your social life, it doesn't matter.
This is really interesting, but I got to admit, this does sound kind of manipulative.
Yeah.
I'm playing games with people.
I understand why you'd say that, but it's super important to, use strategic non-commitment ethically. It's not about tricking people or being sneaky. It's more about self-preservation, being wise, and really being careful about the commitments you make.
So it's about strategy, not scheming.
Exactly. You're trying to, improve your own situation, avoid drama, and just navigate life with a little more intelligence and grace.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits, the risks, even the ethics of it all. But how do we actually do this? How do we become masters of strategic non-commitment?
Well, it all starts with self-awareness. Pay attention to yourself. Like, what do you naturally do? Do you always have to pick a side? Do you get pulled in by, other people's emotions and opinions?
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah.
Especially when I feel like I need to, have an opinion on everything.
Yeah, that's super common. But when you recognize those patterns in yourself, you can start to create a little space, between the trigger and your reaction.
Oh. So it's like hitting the pause button before I do anything.
Yeah, that pause is where you have all the power. It gives you the chance to observe analyze, and then choose how you want to respond. You don't just react on autopilot.
Okay, pause button engaged. What else can we do to, like, cultivate that virgin queen approach to things?
Practice detachment. Now, detachment, I don't mean like being cold or emotionless.
Okay, good.
It just means recognizing that you don't have to have an opinion on every single thing, and you definitely don't have to get involved in every single fight. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all.
So it's about choosing my battles, knowing when to stay out of it.
Exactly. You need to learn which battles are actually worth fighting and which ones are better left alone. Remember the snipe and the muscle.
Right, don't get so caught up in the fight that you lose sight of everything else. And this makes me think of something you said earlier about, like, appearing non-committal. How does that play into all of this?
It's about cultivating this aura of mystery, like
Hmm.
you're a little ungraspable. Remember Queen Elizabeth? She never committed, and it made her the object of everyone's desire. Suitors are constantly trying to get her attention.
It's like she had this, like, magnetic force around her, and it all came from her refusal to commit.
Yes, exactly. And that's where the power is. People are intrigued by what they can't fully understand or control. If you don't reveal your hand too early, you stay interesting. You have influence.
So it's not just what I do, it's also how I present myself. Like, I need to project this air of, like, self-reliance and calculated neutrality. Like, I'm carefully weighing all my options all the time.
Exactly. It's a subtle art, this whole keep them guessing thing, but you got to do it without, being manipulative or fake.
This is all making so much sense. Okay, one final question. How do we know when to stop being non-committal? When is it time to actually commit to something or someone?
That's a great question. It really comes down to intuition and timing. You got to look at the situation, weigh the pros and cons, and then decide, will committing actually make my position better?
So it's about making sure my commitments, they, like, actually match up with my goals and my values.
Yes, precisely. And remember, even when you do commit, it's still important to keep a little bit of detachment. Don't get so tangled up that you lose your freedom to move.
So even in commitment, there's non-commitment.
Yeah. It's a balance. Think of it like a tightrope walker.
Okay.
They're completely committed to walking across that rope,
Mhm.
privately, but they also can't get too attached to the outcome. They know if they get fixated on reaching the other side, they could lose their balance and fall.
Oh, that's such a good image. So it's about being in the moment, but also having perspective,
Yeah.
being flexible.
Exactly. It's about playing the game of life skillfully, with grace, and just a touch of strategic detachment.
This has been, like, wow, a real eye-opener. I feel like I'm seeing everything, the world, myself, everything in this whole new light.
I know, right? It's pretty amazing how these old ideas, these principles, can still be so relevant. They give you a fresh perspective on, well, everything: power, relationships, even just making everyday decisions.
For sure. So as we wrap up our deep dive into strategic non-commitment, what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with? What's the big takeaway?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is this. This isn't about becoming some kind of, unfeeling robot. It's not about shutting down your emotions.
Right.
It's about learning to be more aware, being more thoughtful about the choices you make, the commitments you take on.
Okay.
It's about understanding that sometimes the smartest move is to just hold back, watch what happens, and pick your battles wisely.
It's like being the queen on the chessboard, not just another pawn.
Right. Exactly. And just like Queen Elizabeth, you have the power to create your own game, set your own rules, and ultimately, you're in charge of your own destiny.
That is so empowering. So to everyone listening out there, I challenge you. Think about one situation in your life right now where maybe a little bit of that Virgin Queen strategy could help you out.
Yeah, think about it. How could you use that independence, that carefulness about your commitments, and that air of, I'm considering all my options to get more control, to reach your goals?
And hey, sometimes the most strategic move of all is knowing when to say no.
Absolutely. Until next time, everyone, keep learning, keep asking questions, and most importantly, stay empowered.